Hi, hello and welcome. I'm Becca Harding and I'm a journalist and a business owner. Today I'm talking to Duncan Craig. Duncan is a barrister at Citadel Chambers in Birmingham. He's head of licensing there, and I wanted to talk to him about what he's seeing in the hospitality business as a result of COVID. So Duncan, hello, how are you?
Uh, Considering the pubs are all shut, I'm great, thank you.
Yeah, I think we're all suffering from that, particularly on a Friday night, which it is at the moment. So tell us about your background, because it's in hospitality.
Yeah, I was in the licensed trade for 20 years before I came to the bar. My first job was at Whitbread. I was in sales. I was a beer salesman. I adored
I'm
that.
not going to make any comments there at all.
Still, of all the jobs I did before I came to the bar, that even owning bars and restaurants, I didn't quite enjoy that as much as I did selling beer. I've not got nearly enough time for me to tell you the reasons behind that, but it was an
And I couldn't
incredible,
imagine them.
it was an incredible time to do that job. It wasn't as regimented as it is now. There wasn't the level of oversight. You could come and go as you wanted, as long as you were performing the numbers. It was just a fantastic job. So I did that for 5 years, started in Manchester, moved over to the East Midlands. And then after that, I felt I needed to get into the retail side. So I became an area manager for a pub company called Eldridge Pope, who were based in Dorchester. And I looked after
Oh yes,
about 20
yeah.
pubs for them in Hampshire. Basically, I had Southampton and Portsmouth, some fairly tasty pubs there, but some nice pubs as well,
Yeah.
and hotels in the New Forest. So I had a very wide mix of pubs. About halfway through my time there, one of my old customers at Whitbread was opening up a new restaurant and asked me if I wanted to come in as a partner. He said it was because of my expertise. It's basically because he'd run out of money and he was opening a new restaurant up. So I got involved with that. Ran that for a couple of years, and then I left Eldridge Pope, and then from that point progressed up to having at 1.6 licensed businesses. I guess the peak for me was probably 2006, 2007. That was when the business was at its peak, and that was, I guess, give or take 9 years after I opened the first restaurant up. So around that time, I employed about 120 people. But unfortunately, the business started to struggle in 2008, in particular 2008. And by early 2009, I'd had to place it into administration.
Yeah, it's difficult. But I mean, you understand the business and you understand the fluctuations and difficulties of it, don't you? I mean, that's the bottom line.
I do. And yeah, I understand what a rewarding industry it is and how much fun it is, but it's also hugely challenging. And especially in the last 12 months, it's been horrendous for the trade. So well, listen, I consider that I've been in the trade for 30 years. I consider what I've done in the last 10 years to be part of that. When I lost the business, I wanted to stay connected to the industry, but I wanted, I was done. I'd had 2 years of just, the business had struggled so much and it was so hard to.
So what made you become a barrister rather than for the trade, rather than to go and do something else, like go and manage something, like somebody else's restaurant? Or
Well, I've never been accused of lacking self-confidence.
Really?
Yeah. That's never been thrown at me. So I always felt I would be okay at the job, and I had friends who were barristers who encouraged me to take that step. I was 39 when the business failed. I guess I thought it's now or never. If you don't do it now, you never will. And I guess I just wanted to, having lost the business, and that's to have a licensed business and to lose it is. I think when you've got a licensed business, you perhaps quite enjoy the attention that goes with that.
Yeah.
But you have to accept if that business fails, it's reasonably well run. No, my business were in Nottingham, and I took it hard, and so I guess I wanted to prove myself, and so that's why I did it. I guess it was, if you don't do it now, Duncan, you never will.
Yeah, no, I can absolutely understand that. So how does that help you work with hospitality businesses now, and how do you work with them as a barrister?
Well, I mean, obviously, there are, when I first started practicing, all I really had was my background in the trade, to trade off, I suppose. But then as time progressed and my practice developed, I went through a period where I didn't talk about, or perhaps the type of businesses I was dealing with, I wouldn't necessarily have to bring up my experiences, because I was dealing in the early days with a lot of off licenses. Well, I didn't have any off licenses. But what's happened in the recent years, because I've started to be involved with bigger groups and people who've got bars and restaurants more so than I did before, I've just found frequently that there are just certain instances where they have an issue with their business that I've previously encountered. And that doesn't mean I've got a magic wand and I can necessarily solve the problems. But certainly that if we've got a shared experience with somebody and they've got a problem, it's easy to work that through and come up with suggestions. And I guess I really enjoy, the thing I enjoy most about the job is helping licensed businesses, not necessarily in a legal way. There might be a legal element to it, but I really enjoy pushing people's businesses forward, because
you know what it feels like.
I do. And I was lucky to have really good professional advisors when I had my bars and restaurants, and I really respected the people that gave me that advice, and I know how valuable that is and what it means to somebody that they can be pushed in a way that helps them. So
no, I understand. And I mean, at the moment, it's incredibly difficult for licensed premises. I mean, they can't open. It's sort of really stuck. So what are the kind of problems, I mean, apart from just not being able to open, that you think they're struggling with at the moment because of COVID?
Well, that's enough. The fact that they can't open. I mean, they've been, I think the government's got a lot of things wrong in this pandemic, but I think the support that they've given to the economy, the furlough schemes, clearly been of use, great use to the licensed trade. They're not paying business rates at the moment. So actually, for a lot of them, their only outgoings at the moment are rent. And I've had a lot, in the last 3 months, the number of instructions I've had. I mean, licensing is the main part of my practice, but I also enjoy advising licensed businesses on other areas of law, and the amount of instructions I've had with landlord and tenant work in the last 3 months it's just gone through the roof, because a lot of landlords are being just grossly unreasonable. And they're being, and some of them could be it can actually descend into bullying, and a lot of these tenants, of course, they've got the landlord on one side who's probably in a much greater position financially. He has corporate lawyers doing his bidding for him, and it can be very intimidating for a lot of these tenants. So I quite enjoy, if I'm being honest, that side of engaging with corporate solicitors. Some of them perhaps don't know how to handle me at times, but
I can imagine.
Quite enjoy defending the best interests of a licensed business. It's right that they've. It can't be right. It simply can't be right that somebody who's been a tenant for 10 years and has always paid their rent on time, and a pandemic comes along, and all of a sudden they're struggling to pay their rent. It simply can't be right that they forfeit their lease, or that the landlord can. I mean, look, there's a moratorium on forfeitures at the moment, and that cannot last forever. But I expect to be very busy with that sort of work in the months ahead.
And what other issues are coming in terms of cases? What are the things you're seeing in terms of
I've had a couple of this week. I had a couple of COVID 10K fixed penalty notices.
Which, really?
If they didn't pay.
Was this for having coffee cups or something outside?
No. What's alleged is a little more significant than that. But certainly. So have those. The one, I expect one of those, in fact, will be very interesting indeed, for a whole host of reasons, which probably I can't really descend into now. And actually, what I've noticed in recent weeks is a big upturn in the number of inquiries for applications for new licenses. So people are looking to the future. They're thinking, well, that process can take months, not necessarily. And so I guess as the vaccine rolls out, then there will always be opportunities in any situation, and there are lots of licensed businesses who are struggling enormously, and I don't doubt that a number of them will struggle to survive, and that's obviously tragic because they've done nothing wrong. But equally, life has taught me, certainly over the last 30 years, that there are always opportunities for people, and people will always fancy the chances. So yeah, quite a bit on the application side. A lot of my practice revolves around licensing appeals. That side of it has almost ground to a halt. But once things get going again, I've got a huge number of appeals that I'm going to have to hopefully resolve most of them. But certainly the courts aren't working as well as I would like.
I think it's quite difficult at the moment for them, isn't it?
Certainly the magistrates courts. I think the Crown courts are, and the civil courts are running. I'm just finding some difficulties with the magistrates courts at the moment. Not all of them. There's a lot of good people who work in them, but
so
yeah.
what sort of time spans are you seeing at the moment that's different to normal in terms of getting cases dealt with?
With appeals, well, I mean, I've done two. I get a lot of appeals and I resolve most of them. So I don't have that many that actually go to a full contested hearing. But in the course of a normal year, I'd probably do maybe 10 contested appeals out of, say, 35 that would come in. 10 would actually end up at court. I did 2 last year. And they were ones that they only took place because there was a statutory requirement for them to take place. But all the other stuff is just keeps getting listed, adjourned, booted down the line. But of course, for a lot of these businesses, they've been particularly if they're an off license or other licensed businesses that hopefully come April, May time, and they can open up. For example, if a license has been revoked, then if they appeal, they can continue to trade. So it's not prejudicial to the license holder that these appeals keep getting booted down the line. And of course, my expectation is, because enough time will have passed from whatever the issue was previously, that hopefully a lot of these appeals can be resolved quite sensibly with the councils.
So are you seeing licensed premises taking risks because of the problem of not making money at the moment? Are they doing things that are pushing their ability to keep their license and taking dangerous risks?
No, I mean, there've been 3 phases really. The first phase was March last year. Prime Minister directed all pubs shut. I got about 3-4 jobs during that first lockdown period where people had opened and shouldn't, but other than that, nothing. There were just 4 people that various levels of culpability, I suppose, had traded during the first lockdown. So in terms of that, very quiet. Then when the pubs opened in July, in fact, July last year was my best ever month billing wise, because all of a sudden it's gone from you can't open to, well, you can open, but you can't do this, and you might be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so I was just incredibly busy during that period, and that continued really up until, I guess, September. And then
was that giving people support in how to deal with the laws? Was that and how to deal with the changes?
Yeah, a little bit of that, a bit of advice on that front. And obviously the regulations were constantly changing all the time, and we would move. The tier system changed, but some of it as well was inevitably when people have gone from a situation where you can't open your business and then you can, but there are restrictions, that then invited regulatory scrutiny, shall we say. So obviously police, licensing officers would go down to premises, and so there were things there that I would need to deal with. Again, during that period as well, I was very busy with applications because people understandably thought, well, we're through the other side of it. What subsequently happened is since we've effectively been, give or take, other than a short break at Christmas, lockdown now for, I guess, a couple of months, maybe a bit more than that, in fact, 3 months now, I suppose. Then maybe not quite that, but 2.5 months. Then the licensing side of my work has dropped off. The landlord and tenant side, as I've said, and other areas of law have picked up, but I fully expect once the pubs reopen again, pubs, restaurants, bars reopen again in the spring, shall we say, I expect to be extremely busy again then.
Yeah.
So
So with your experience of licensing as a restaurant owner and now as a barrister dealing with other people's problems, what reforms would you like to see most in licensing laws and procedures?
well, unlike a lot of other licensing lawyers, who particularly ones who of a certain vintage, shall we say, who always say they preferred the old 1964 Licensing Act. I think the Licensing Act actually overall works pretty well as a piece of legislation. I do think, and I've touched on it actually just now, I do think the appeals procedure needs looking at. It certainly needs streamlining. There are many aspects to the appeals procedure that aren't particularly satisfactory, and certainly we haven't got enough time today for me to go into any detail. But
we can always do another webinar on that.
do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would certainly look at the appeals procedure in a number of ways.
Is there anything that you think would help safeguard the future of the traditional pub as we know it?
Well,
is there anything you single-handedly can do to to protect it?
I think there has to be some form of statutory or judicial intervention about rent arrears. I think that, quite frankly, if rent arrears are going to be enforced as per strictly as per leases, then I think the economic system we live under will simply collapse. And so that there's going to have to be a bit of pain sharing, I think, and whether it's going to be, governments don't like interfering with contracts that have been agreed by individuals acting on their own free will, but they've intervened and imported some terms into the insurance contracts, and my view is they're going to have to do something along those lines with leases, because so I guess it's not so much a licensing issue, because obviously it would extend beyond the license trade, but certainly I feel very strongly, I'm hoping that some tenant is going to challenge when a landlord enforces it, to say this lease has an implied term that relates to a pandemic, and there has to be a bit of pain sharing. Failing that, and landlords equally have financial commitments, so the government would need to intervene with the banks as well, I think. But that's certainly be one thing, and the VAT side of things, that maybe that should be extended for the licensed trade for a significant period. I do wonder how quickly people will get back into the habit. I'm hoping it's very quickly, and I think young people will, but just getting back into the habit of going into a pub and not thinking about social distancing. I'm not saying that's, by the way, I'm not saying that's imminent. That hopefully might
it's going to be a while.
In the autumn, maybe. So there's that question mark there. Have people's habits changed? Are people going to be frightened about going into a pub where there aren't social distancing restrictions? So there are a lot of question marks for the trade. But look, as human beings, we are social animals. And let's be honest, I think most people in some way, shape or form, and certainly a huge number of people, have just missed going to the pub, just going after work for a pint and not thinking about it. And I suppose the timing of this is good, because hopefully by the time the restrictions do start getting relaxed, we're getting into the spring, the days are getting longer. So
people might start to go out again, hopefully.
So
just to finish, what advice would you give to businesses in order to protect their licenses in this environment? So what's your top tips for them at the moment?
Well, certainly not to be intimidated by your landlord. I mean, that's not strictly related to the license, but it is related to their business. Just don't be intimidated by your landlord. If you're in arrears for your rent, I don't think that's going to be as easy to end in forfeiture proceedings as it would have done a couple of years ago. And look, the regulations can change with bewildering speed, but it's not going to be the case where Boris Johnson's going to turn around on the 15th of April and go, right, that's it, we're done, everybody back to normal. And so just be mindful that people need to be mindful about the regs, and it would just be a shame for any licensed business to get this far and then fall at the last hurdle and lose their license. But look, regulatory authorities have to be understanding that people aren't going to get it right all the time, and but certainly if people are under any form of scrutiny, it's important that they are seen to be complying with the regulations, and certainly that's the underlying advice I would give to them.
No, that's brilliant. Well, Duncan, thank you so much today. And I'm sure everyone listening really appreciated your time and the advice that you've given and found it really helpful. So if you have any questions for Duncan or want to get in touch, then you can contact him at Citadel Chambers or through his LinkedIn profile. And if there are any other issues you'd like covered or that you find useful, then please comment on this video or contact Citadel Chambers. So thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone. Bye.